Hi, in this tutorial we're going to look at while loops. In the previous tutorial we were looking at for loops, and for loops are basically a type of repetition structure where code is repeated and it's done using some sort of counter. So for loops have an inbuilt counter. With while loops, the syntax is it's similar, but it's a little bit different to for loops. There's no built-in counter in a while loop. But you can use a counter if you want. However, if you do use a counter, you need to include it yourself. So the difference really between a while loop and a for loop is that a for loop will keep repeating a section of code, and it will use a counter to know how many times it needs to repeat that section of code. And that counter could be just a number. So it could be a number that increases, and when it reaches a certain point, the code will stop repeating. Or it could be cycling through an array or characters in a string or something like that. Okay, so that's how for loops work. While loops basically repeat code while a certain condition is true, or while a condition evaluates to true. So there's no built-in counter in a while loop, but you can use one if you want to. So basically with a while loop, we start with the keyword while, and then in brackets we have a condition, and while that condition evaluates to true, the loop will continue repeating. After that we have curly brackets, and the code that needs to be repeated will go inside those curly brackets. So it looks something like this: while, and then test condition goes in the brackets, and then after that we have curly brackets and the code goes here. Okay, so that code will keep repeating while this condition that's being tested evaluates to true. Okay, for this while loop I'm going to make a counter variable. So I'm just going to create a variable called counter, and I'm going to set it to 0 outside the loop. The condition that I'm going to put inside the brackets is just going to be something like this: counter is less than 5. Okay, so while the counter is less than 5, it's going to run some code in here. Okay, so the code that I'm going to put here is just a simple echo statement. I'm going to echo, display in the browser, the value of that variable, counter, and I'm just going to make it so that each time it's displayed, it's on a new line. So I'm going to add in the HTML line break tag there, and that's all. So I'll just end that line with a semicolon. Now what will happen here is basically when the code runs, we have a counter variable that's created, it's initialized, it's set to a value of 0, and then we have a while loop here. So while the counter is less than 5, okay, so it starts off as 0. So while it's less than 5, it will display the counter and add a line break. The problem here is that nothing happens after that, so the counter doesn't actually increase, doesn't change. So we need to add a line, and we'll just make the counter increase by 1. Oops, just need a $sign there in front of that variable. So we'll make the counter variable's value increase by 1 every time this loop runs, so every iteration of the loop. If we left that out, what would happen is, because the condition would always just keep evaluating to true, it would be an infinite loop and it would crash the browser. So the loop would never end because the counter is never increasing, so it always is true that 0 is less than 5. Okay, so we need something there to make the condition change. Alright, so that's it. We'll just save that. Okay, we'll go to the browser. I've got the page open here. I'll just refresh it. And there we go. So just bring Sublime Text over here. Alright, so we've got a counter that's set to 0. So while the counter is less than 5, it's going to display the counter. Alright, so it starts off as 0, so yes, that's true, it's less than 5. So it displays 0. There's a line break, okay, so it comes to a new line. It increases the counter by 1, so now 0 becomes 1. And 1 is still less than 5, so it displays the counter again. So we've got 1, and then it just keeps repeating that. So until the counter becomes 5. So eventually the counter becomes 4, and then it comes back to here. It checks, is the counter less than 5? Yes, it's 4. So it prints out 4 here, or displays that. Counter increases to 5. It comes back, checks whether the counter is less than 5. It evaluates to false because 5 is not less than 5. It's equal to 5. And so it does not run any of this code in here. So it never displays the value 5. And the loop stops there. Okay? So that's basically how a while loop runs. You have a condition that's tested, and while that condition evaluates to true, it will repeat code. All right, that's a while loop. Thanks for watching.